Let me tell you a little bit about our authors today. Stacy Little is a food blogger with a big following and a bigger love for Southern food. He grew up refusing bowls of ice cream for collard greens. From the time he was old enough to bang on pots and pans, Stacy has found himself in the kitchen. Excuse me. He grew up tugging at the apron strings of his three most influential women in his life: his mother, his grandmother, his great grandmother, and he credits much of his success to their love and guidance. Today, his easy, delicious recipes, heartfelt stories have been posted on his blog, southernbite.com, which he created in 2018. Carrie Morey founded her homemade biscuit business in 2005 with the goal of making the tender, buttery, made by hand biscuits of her mother accessible across the country. Over 15 years later, Callie's Hot Little Biscuit is widely recognized as an iconic Southern brand with national retail exposure. Four grab and go eateries in Charleston, Atlanta, and Charlotte, a food truck, and a cult like following. Carrie is also featured on a PBS docu-series, How She Rolls. This is her second cookbook. Her first cookbook was Callie's Biscuits and Southern Traditions, and Hot Little Suppers comes out tomorrow, as I said. Carrie lives in Charleston, South Carolina, with her husband and three daughters. Cheryl Day is a New York Times best-selling cookbook author, a James Beard Award semifinalist for Outstanding Pastry Chef, a self-taught scratch baker, and an entrepreneur. Cheryl and her husband Griffith are co-founders of the Back in the Day Bakery in Savannah, Georgia, and co-authors of the Back in the Day Bakery Cookbook. Cheryl is the co-founder of Southern Restaurants for Racial Justice and a founding member of the leadership committee for the James Beard Foundation Investment Fund for Black and Indigenous Americans. Her first solo cookbook, Cheryl Day's Treasury of Southern Baking, will be published next week, and we will have all three books at Barrett Bookstore. So sit back and enjoy the show. We're about to get started, and let me pose a question to all three of you. If people haven't had a chance to see your books or are not familiar with you, could you give them a brief description of what you cook and how you cook and why you cook? Anyone can jump in.
Everybody jump in at the same time, right?
How about you, Stacy? Why don't you start?
So, my book is a collection of several different things. It's a compilation of the tried and true Southern things that I grew up with. So, from things like turnip greens and cornmeal dumplings to chicken and dumplings to all that kind of stuff. But it's also a testament to the people who have followed my blog. It was really important for me in writing my book that we capture that. And, one of my favorite kinds of cookbooks are those cookbooks, those like community cookbooks. They're the junior league cookbooks, the one that have everybody's best recipes. So when I wrote the book, I put a call out to my readers and said, I want your best stuff. So we were able to include a lot of reader recipes in the book too. So it kind of has that community cookbook feel. So it's a collection. It's my life. It's my family. There's so much in there that represents who I am and the folks that came before me.
Thank you. Maybe Cheryl, do you want to take the question next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Cheryl Day. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight, everybody. So my new book, Cheryl Day's Treasury of Southern Baking, is just that. It's a compilation of over 200 tried and true recipes that I have collected with personal stories of my own, as well as other Southern bakers throughout history. Baking is in my DNA. I come from a long line of people who have a sweet tooth, and like many of us in the South. And this book is just a compilation of everything you would ever want if you are interested in Southern baking. I wanted it to be the book or baking, really. You don't have to be in the South to enjoy Southern delicacies, right, y'all?
Right.
And so I wanted it to be a compilation of all these recipes. Like if you want to make biscuits, there's 4 recipes. If you want cornbread, there's several recipes of that. Because I always say, how many great biscuits are there? Truly, how many grandmothers are there? I mean, we all, probably between the 3 of us, we all make a different style of a biscuit, and they're all equally delicious. So yeah, it's just a really fun book. I tell my personal journey of how I'm a girl that grew up in Los Angeles, but I spent all of my summers from the age of 8 with my grandmother learning how to bake. And it's a lot about that personal journey for me. So I'm really excited for you all to see it next week.
Well, it's beautiful. How about you, Carrie?
Well, this book, Hot Little Suppers, is really an authentic journey of what I feed my family and what they're craving, what I'm craving, and the stories that are behind that meal. And it's actually not Southern. My first book, Callie's Biscuits and Southern Tradition, was very Southern, very much a journey of my childhood, and really probably the reason and the stories behind why I love food so much and why I knew that was my passion and I had to make it into a business. But this is really about what I'm craving and what my family is craving, and how we have taken food and made it a memory and an heirloom tradition, and sprinkled in with drinks and desserts and funny silly stories about things like Italian wedding soup, and then my children creating an entire wedding with all the neighborhood people. So it's Southern, it's Mexican, it's Indian, it's Asian. It has so many cultures in it, and the theme is just whatever you do, gather around the family supper table and make memories.
That sounds great.
And Carrie is a wonderful cook. I know that firsthand.
Thank you. And actually, this book does have an entire chapter on biscuits, and it's one of the recipes is a recipe that Cheryl and I created together
Yes, that's
for an
right.
event, a creamsicle biscuit. So it does have an entire chapter on biscuits, but and then it's separated by seasons and occasions. So
let me also ask all 3 of you, how long did it take you to actually compile these recipes and get it into a book form? Why don't we start with Stacy again?
For me, it took about 14 months. Having the blog, I had so many things that were already written down, that were already captured. But the book is more than just that. There's tons of family stories. And so it took about 14 months to put it all together, to collect those reader recipes, and to pull some of those stories that I've told from the blog, and new ones too that are included just in the book.
Sounds good. Cheryl, do you want to add to that?
Yeah. Oh, this book took me a long time. It is something I feel truly, I've been working on it my entire life, and I won't say how old I am, but I've been working on it a long time, and it took I would say about 5 years.
Wow.
It kept growing and growing. It's very large, as you mentioned. It's big. It's 400 pages. It's got everything you would ever want to know as a baker, all kinds of information and advice. I poured my heart and soul to it. And it kept growing and growing and growing. And the pandemic turned out to be a blessing in disguise for me, because I was able to finish it finally. So, because I had some days off.
Well, it is really a beautiful book. And how about you, Carrie? Because you've got so many irons in the pot. I don't know how you do everything.
And we share the same photographer, Carrie and I.
Oh,
do.
nice.
Yeah.
And measure. This actually was similar to Stacy. These were whenever I cooked for my family, I wrote a blog about it, and I would say the recipe started 6-7 years ago, and then I didn't use every single recipe, but I went through and I collected them and organized them by season and picked our favorites and most importantly the favorite story. So it's been many years in the making, but you know, choosing and all that, it was a pandemic baby. So I always say it was about a year, 12 to 15 months to actually finalize all the recipes.
Great.
Yeah, I love that scene on, I don't know if any of y'all have seen Carrie's show, How She Rolls, but I loved that episode where you were kind of putting the book together. And it was really, I thought it was really a great thing for folks to see the process of how you pull things out and you're testing things. And it's such, you know, such a long process. I mean, from start to finish, you know, it just takes a really long time if you're getting recipes tested, edited, photographed. I spent 17 days with my very small and mighty team photographing this book, 17 days straight. So
Wow.
it's yeah.
Do you all have recipe testers?
I do.
Yeah.
I have a recipe tester for my blog. And then I went back because it had been so many years that I really wanted to make sure everything was right. And so then I hired a second recipe tester just to make sure that everything was perfect. I mean, the way I don't write things down, I'm really bad at writing recipes. So, I mean, I have sticky notes everywhere, or notes in my phone. And so to transcribe all that and have to remember, I'm not a measurer. So I definitely wanted to make sure that they all were perfect.
Yeah. I did not hire a like a professional recipe tester, but I have lots of folks that I pass recipes out to test. So that's always a fun process. For me, some of my other books, I've had people that have baked their way through the entire book. And some of those folks I did give recipes to test for me because they're home bakers. I'm really a home baker turned professional. I'm self-taught. So yeah, I try to get all levels of bakers to be able to make the recipes.
That's great.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's just me. But that's not to say things didn't go through the testing process, because you know, when you have a million folks that are following your blog, if something's incorrect, they're going to let you know pretty quickly. So you know, I have the beauty of having lots of recipe testers that are very vocal, which I love. I love that feedback that we get. I mean, you know, it makes us all better cooks.
Yeah.
Okay. You all have successful businesses as well as writing cookbooks. How do you juggle everything, and what are your tips for managing business and family? And we start with Carrie.
Yes, with Carrie. I think
Since you're managing it right now with
the
17
master
girls.
of it, I think.
Well, I think that some days are better than others, and you know, some days it works really well, and some days it doesn't. I'm currently locked myself in my bedroom, so nobody can get to me now. So that's how I'm dealing with it right now. But I started the business knowing that I wanted to be a mom first, and so everything else has been built around that. So I make sure that I'm home almost every day by the time they get home from school, and I try really hard not to miss moments like games and things like that. And you know, when we get to a point where I'm starting to be pulled in too many directions, then I say, okay, either we have to wait and we can't do this, or we've got to hire someone. And you know, a lot of times there have been things that I've missed out on, but I've never missed out on my family. So that is just what's right for me, and it makes me really proud that I've been able to do it on my terms, and definitely in a slower vein than most business owners. But I'm okay with that because I've had the life that I have always wanted. So
Yeah, it's definitely a balancing act. I think Carrie really is inspiring with all the things that she does. I will mention, however, that I do work with my husband every day. So I think I get extra points for that.
major extra points. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, my husband Griff and I, we work together. We learned early on how to create balance and we just kind of structured our life where he's in charge of certain things, I'm in charge of certain things. And we don't discuss it once we get home. That's kind of, if we have to ride around the block a few more times, we will. But we just, we make sure that we don't bring anything back to the home. But that's another way too. I've had Back in the Day Bakery for 20 years. So that's been another great way to test recipes. I feel like I have mastered the art of learning what people crave. And it's really fun when I'm working on, like when we were working on this book, we would put the good, the treats out in the cases, and we would make those available to our guests. So that was really fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, trying to create balance, it's just it's a day to day.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, for me, I started SouthernBite.com with no intention of any of this ever happening. I mean, to be totally honest, SouthernBite.com started because I was writing restaurant reviews for the Metro paper and I needed a place for them to live. And so it's been this kind of very weird evolution for me. But I don't have quite the struggle or as many irons in the fire as Carrie and Cheryl have, but for me, it's again, like they both said, it's about balance. It's about finding that the balance so that being a small business owner doesn't become the only thing that you do. As somebody who's super family focused, that's always been the number one thing for me. And so I will admit to being a control freak. And so the hardest thing for me was to start to delegate tasks and to find a small team of folks that I trusted. Those were the biggest challenges, but it's about finding somebody that you can hand things to sometimes, because being able to do that frees you up to be able to sit down at the table with your family. And like so many of them have said, that's the most important thing.
That's so great that you all see that platform is necessary for your lives. Let's see. How about cooking with children? Carrie, I see you on your show doing it with your middle daughter, your oldest daughter.
I do it with all of them, and they kind of go in and out of interest levels. And when they were younger, they were really into it, and it's a little stressful with young children, but it's so interesting to watch them when they get excited about it, because then they really take ownership of it, and you can get kids to eat things that you would never think they would eat just by getting them to chop it or wash it or saute it. And of course they love baking because they'll eat just about any baked goods. So but yeah, I think that it's a super important, well, it's the focus of our family for sure. It is, who's coming for supper and what are we having, and it's a family affair. But it's not easy, and I get why people, it's sometimes easier just to say, just let me do it. But it will pay off. The payoff is huge.
Yeah, legacy is such an important part of what I do. I don't have any children of my own, but I do love to get with, I love other people's children. And I will say one other thing to push it back or to highlight, Carrie, another thing that I know about you, and I just think is really special talking about legacy, is the fact that I know that you are really, taking on and letting your girls see how important it is for them to know, to be able to pass on these recipes. Because in my culture, in Black culture especially, a lot of recipes were erased or forgotten, erased completely. And older recipes in general, that does happen in history. So I just really admire that, watching you show your girls, no, this is how you do it. This is, this is like legacy. This is passing it on so that culture isn't erased.
I couldn't agree
Um,
with you more.
So much of it is oral history. We all know that.
mhm.
If you weren't with your mother, your grandmother, or you didn't write it down, you might not know a recipe. So that's why, like Stacy said, I do love the old community cookbooks. Many of them showed up on my doorstep when I was doing the research for my book, and I love them because they're written histories basically of Southern culture, and that's really important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and go ahead.
no, keep going.
I was just going to say, in the process of writing my book, there were recipes that, for instance, were my great grandmother's, and of course she's not with us anymore. But I knew that I wanted to include those. There were family stories about those, and so it was about getting in the kitchen and playing around with what I knew that she had used, and then testing it on family members until we got it right. And
Right.
as I was going through that process, I realized, my son never knew her, but in preserving those recipes of hers, I get to share a little bit of her with him. He gets to know who she was,
Mhm.
and that really became a focus for me. It was more about writing that book and capturing those recipes. And my son is 13, and like Carrie was saying, there's an ebb and flow. Some days he loves to be in the kitchen, other days not so much. But I think when they do show that interest, you pull them in, right? I mean, you just grab them and you pull them in, and you let them do the things and understand. And just like Carrie said too, I think when you have the opportunity to put kids in the kitchen, they become less of picky eaters when they have the process or when they're involved in that process of cooking. Once we grew a little garden and my son Jack got to see that process, he was much more interested in tasting okra or cucumbers or whatever it was when he planted those seeds.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure the three of us probably, I know speaking for myself, and something tells me it was true for both of y'all. We were those kids in the kitchen at one point,
Yeah.
learning the recipes. And it's been obviously a very important part of our lives.
Yeah, so much. How about if I ask you for a recipe from your books that you can't live without? Oh, that's a hard one. It's like your favorite color.
It is, or your favorite child. Fortunately, I only have one.
I'll go first. None of us could really truly pick one recipe,
No.
but probably for me that I cannot live without would be my mom's lemon meringue pie recipe.
Oh
Wow.
my gosh,
Because it
yes.
just harkens back so many personal memories for me. And I remember the point when I was trying to recreate it, that it was a very emotional thing to try to figure out how to make it just like she did. I lost my mom when I was 22. So just kind of, that memory of her pie. And when I made it and it tasted like hers, it was just, like
Yeah.
a special moment. So I would say,
Yeah.
yeah, the lemon meringue pie.
How about you, Stacy?
I mentioned the turnip greens and cornmeal dumplings earlier, and I think that was my great grandmother's recipe, and it was never written down. And being able to recreate that was the same kind of feeling, the same kind of, I instantly had her in the kitchen with me. But for me, if there was one recipe that I couldn't live without, it had to be biscuits. And I tell people that all the time because, we all could write 1,000 recipes for biscuits. But until you've had somebody in the kitchen with you and shown them how to make biscuits so that they understand what the texture of the dough should be like, and there's so many nuances with it. That's my favorite thing to cook. So if I had to pick one thing, I would probably say biscuits.
So now, what are you going to say, Carrie? Since he's
I
picking
mean,
biscuits.
No, I took it.
All right. Well, I was gonna say biscuit, but my buttermilk
Yeah.
biscuits, 'cause
Say
That's
it.
what got me here. But I will
Yeah.
also say, and I agree with you 100%, Stacy. I love to teach people how to make it, and everybody's recipe is different, and that's comes from your whatever your heirloom recipe is, and that's what's so magical about biscuits is that there are a million ways to make them. But also, one recipe that is in this cookbook is my mom. It's a version of her okra rice,
Mm.
which is it's just so comforting, and it reminds me of my youth and the buttery okra folded in with the rice, which rice was served for me growing up with every meal. And I can get people that don't like okra to love okra rice, and so that's how I know it's so special. And so I would just say both of those, really, the buttermilk biscuits and the okra rice, and they're so simple but rich at the same time, and have hold a lot of special memories for me.
They sound delicious. What about holiday favorites? Do you each have a special something you want to do on the holidays all the time?
Mm.
Oh yeah. I mean, there has to be cornbread stuffing on the table. Absolutely has to be cornbread stuffing.
Okay,
Um,
so that's so funny because we call it cornbread dressing.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of go back and forth, but dressing, stuffing, you know what I mean? That good stuff. But so that is the one thing that I always crave. If I mean that I could not
Yeah,
ever give that up.
me either.
Cornbread stuffing, dressing, whatever. I don't. Yeah, now I'm questioning. I don't remember what we used to call it. And then I love sweet potato souffle or sweet
Ooh,
potato pie. I love sweet potatoes, warm sweet potatoes. Those are things that I can't live without during the holidays, and I am thoroughly looking forward to them.
um, let's see. Could we talk a little bit about how COVID affected all your businesses? Or should we not go there?
You know, Cheryl, said that there was a blessing in disguise there, and I think that if we have an opportunity to find the blessing in what that was, I think for me specifically, it was people being stuck at home, and so they were a lot more interested in getting in the kitchen. But I also think what I found interesting, at least on the backside, watching what people were making, watching the recipes that they were printing, they were basics. They were, beans, dried beans. They
Uh,
were things like cinnamon toast. They were, basic things that provided people comfort. It was chicken and dumplings. It was, that kind of stuff. So if there, if we are to find a positive thing in that, I think it forced us to be families again. It forced us to be together. And a lot of times what happened is that togetherness happened in the kitchen.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of focusing on because we could all dwell on the bad things, but there have been some good things that have come out of it. I felt like a ballet dancer or I don't know, some kind of dancer at some point, just pivoting from right to left and back and forth. But we started a small batch provisions company during that time. I finished my cookbook. I really started to evaluate even more, and I was already starting to do this, but to evaluate even more what's truly important and how I can create the kind of business for the life that I want to live. And that became even more important during that time. Health.
Definitely, definitely. I felt like the family time that we got was we'll never get that back, and it was so magical. But it also it forced me to um, really be okay with failure, and I think that's a hard thing to wrap your head around as a business owner. Is we had to all say if we fail, we fail. There's nothing we can do about it, and we're gonna
Beyond
figure
your
it out
control.
and we're
Yeah.
going to get through it and we're going to do it together. And and it made me less scared of failing. And actually it made our team very scrappy. And it was like, how many ways can we sell a biscuit? What are we going to do now? And we always talk about within our team, we worked harder in that year and a half than we ever have. And we really gave ourselves an extra boost of confidence because we did it. We made it through and we came out on the other side, and we were very resilient and just proved to ourselves that we can make it through anything.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Remind me, Carrie, how many biscuits a day your company generates?
On a normal day, somewhere between 10 and 12,000 Christmas time, but yeah.
That's a lot of biscuits.
It's
Let me ask you, Carrie, also, since we're kind of on your biscuit land, how did the TV show come about? Was it a good addition? And how did your staff respond to it?
The TV show came about because I had a production company reach out to me and ask me if I wanted to do a TV show.
There you go.
And we went through a series of, well, would you do it on this network? And would you do it on this network? And I said, no, 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 no. And then they said, well, what about PBS? And I said, I'd consider it. And so then he introduced me to the president of our local ETV in South Carolina. And he came actually and took a biscuit class from me, which is where you would learn my story if you didn't know me. And he said, I think that you have a story that's a great one to tell, and we'd love to discuss, creating a show for you. And I honestly thought, okay, I really didn't take it very seriously. I mean, the fact that it came to fruition, I look back on it now, and I think I was going through the process, but thought, like so many, you always get opportunity conversations, and I always see them through because I just love to learn about what this could be, but I never really think that anything like that is going to happen. Even when we were filming, I said, oh, well, this is just going to be a pilot. It probably won't go anywhere. So I was shocked that it all happened. And yes, it has been wonderful to be able to share my story, and very well received. And I think my staff, I haven't heard any complaints. I think they've all enjoyed it. And my family's enjoyed it. And I think that the number one thing about the show was that I felt very safe, and I felt like I could trust the group that was producing it, but also that it was public television, and I knew that I was protected.
And it's such a great show.
It is a great show.
It is. Yeah.
It is. It's very good.
Very authentic.
Thank you.
Yep. The Cheryl, will you tell us a little bit about the James Beard Foundation you're involved with?
Sure. So I, along with two other friends, two pastry chefs, Sarah O'Brien and Lisa Donovan, we, after all of the social unrest last year, we decided that we would we co-founded an organization called Southern Restaurants for Racial Justice.
Mm-hmm.
And we started doing, Carrie was involved with this also, but we started just asking friends if they thought they could give a percentage of sales. And mind you, this was during a global pandemic. And Southern restaurants, everybody wanted to help, and they graciously did. So the first time we did a fundraiser, we raised $100,000 in a weekend, and that kind of gave us legs. And then James Beard approached me about being on their leadership board to also kind of give my, lend myself to giving grants to Black and Indigenous owned restaurants all over the country. Fast forward now, we actually, Heinz Corporation just donated $1 million to our organization, and we were able to give 71 grants to to restaurants, Black-owned restaurants that are in marginalized communities, underserved. And it's just been a really great, another great thing that's come out of the pandemic is that I've been able to kind of help. Legacy, as I said, is such an important part of the work that I do. And I wanted to be able to kind of lend a hand for other restaurants. And it's gone all over the country now, where we've been able to kind of help create generational wealth and help these Black-owned and Indigenous restaurants kind of keep going. So, yeah.
Amazing.
Amazing. Yeah, amazing.
That's awesome. What a success story. Stacy, I just wanted to ask you how the blog has taken on. Has it just started to direct you in one direction or another, or did you always feel you were going to go that way?
No, I never imagined I would be doing anything that I'm doing right now. And you know what? I went one time not too long ago, and I went to speak to my kids' class about Career Day. And as I was standing in the classroom, I remembered that I was in the same classroom when I remembered hearing the word the internet the first time. And suddenly I realized how old I was. But, you know, it's one of those things where it's just kind of been this weird evolution. You know, like I said, I mean, this started for me because I was writing restaurant reviews for the Advertiser, which is our local, our metro paper. And in 2008, they cut the whole section that those were in. And I had people that were like, hey, we really enjoyed those. Do you have another format? Could you keep doing that? So I started southernbite.com as a way to do that. And on a whim, posted a recipe because somebody had been at our house and asked us. And I thought, you know, I'm typing the recipe that Monday morning, going to send it an email. And I'm like, well, I've got this website. I'll just throw this recipe up here. And then people started paying attention to that. And so, like I said, it's kind of been this weird evolution. I mean, I'm sitting in my own test kitchen now. I work for myself, and none of these things were ever on the radar for me, and certainly never writing a book. But sometimes when the path gets put in front of you, you follow that path in faith, and good things happen.
True, very true.
Absolutely.
Yeah, all three of you have done that. We saw Cheryl and Carrie at a food festival in Charleston on one of your episodes. Do you have any other favorite food festivals or food towns?
Ooh.
Charleston's really good, but that was in March, right before, or during, unbeknownst to us, it was the first weekend of March, right, Carrie? And we served 600 biscuits?
Yeah, in about an hour.
No,
people were everywhere. And I mean, Cheryl, I don't remember us having a conversation about pandemic. I did not understand the gravity of it at that time. Did you?
Yeah, I was starting to get a little paranoid. I just remember, like hand sanitizing, but, wasn't wearing a mask, or we didn't know the gravity of it. I had just flown out to Los Angeles to adopt a dog that I fell in love with on the internet the week before. So clearly I didn't have good sense, but it was just, but we did it, and it was great. And it's fun to see it on your show, because I remember that, happening, and it was still a lot of fun. But I don't know, Charleston is a really, like, who else would you say? I don't know if I've really gone to any other.
I've been to Aspen, Highlands, Euphoria. I really like Highlands. Was lovely because it's in such a beautiful space and tiny, and it's mountainy and cold, and fun group. But I mean, I'm biased, but I think Charleston is the best.
Yeah, you hear so much about Charleston, and that's in the spring. It's March.
It's March, yes. And I remember cooking a dinner with Mike Anthony from Gramercy Tavern in my house, and he said to me, our school's getting ready to shut down. We're getting ready to evacuate Manhattan and move back to my parents in Long Island. And I looked at him, I said, "What are you?" I said, "You're kidding me. That's crazy." And I mean, then Tuesday after that was a Friday or Saturday night. Tuesday, we shut down, Charleston shut down. We shut down our restaurants. I mean, it was days later. It
Yeah.
was crazy.
People that were sick, got sick, unfortunately, with COVID that weekend.
Yeah.
I went straight back. I went and got some barbecue from Lewis Barbecue and Rodney Scott's, and what you do when you're in Charleston, you have to do both. And I took it back to my hotel room and I had a feast and I stayed in my room every night. So I think that saved me.
I don't think I went out either.
Yeah, I think that you were not alone on that. Let's see. We have, someone's asked us if you have any advice for novice cooks. I love the fact that you put your equipment in your cookbooks. That I think is so helpful. But do you have any other, how to give them courage?
Oh, I just think, I mean, y'all can answer this. As far as baking, I say you have to bake a lot. Practice makes perfect. Take notes. Most of the time, it's going to be edible. So just remember what you did and what you might do differently next time. And then, I mean, you've got 3 great cookbooks here, tried and true recipes. Make sure that there's other great cookbook authors. Find somebody that you really, I think it's all about trust, that you can find a recipe that is going to be, worth its weight in ingredients and just go for it. I think, I mean, start with something maybe simple and work up. There's definitely a pride in craft that starts to build after a while with baking. And yeah, I say start small and just go for it.
Sure, and I totally agree. I think have a little confidence. I think that's the thing that's the biggest challenge for most folks is they convince themselves that they can't do it. So have a little confidence. And I mean, if the worst thing happens, you order pizza, right? I mean, it doesn't get much worse than that. So sometimes it's just about doing it. It's about taking the step and jumping in there.
And it's usually very therapeutic. I know for me.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, I think if you're stressed about it, which I think a lot of people are if you don't cook regularly, get a glass of wine, turn on some music. And I always tell people, learn to make something that you really love to eat, like crave, and make it over and over and over again so that you could make it for the neighbors and your friend, like make it so many times. And then that's how you gain confidence. And you're like, oh, I can roast a chicken in my sleep. And then you want to make chicken and you want to make, risotto with it. And then, and just start adding on.
Don't set yourself up for failure. Don't make, decide that you're going to make a pie crust from scratch and, a pie and your in-laws are coming over. I mean, that's just not good common sense. And I don't recommend it. I say practice first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And start with the easy stuff.
Yeah.
Carrie, in your book, you mentioned that biscuits gave you a philosophy for life. Do you want to elaborate on that for the audience?
Oh, it's a great one.
Oh, yeah. So in our company, we talk about the importance of being a biscuit. And we've made it into a t-shirt. And it's really our, I'd say, our unwritten company culture. But we're always talking about how biscuits rise tall, and you should too. And that just means have confidence. Biscuits are warm and buttery on the inside, which means to be kind. And then biscuits are open to anyone's jam. And we believe that you should be open to everyone's differences, no matter who they are, what they look like, what they believe in. And just to be an open, kind, confident person is living the life of being a biscuit. So
I love it.
Yeah, that's great.
Biscuit philosophy. All right, we're coming to the end of our 45 minutes, so we'll take some questions from the audience shortly. But also, I'd love to hear from all three of you about where you want to go next. Do you have any projects? Do you have any ideas? Do you want to take a break? Do you want to gear up? I'd love to maybe start with Cheryl.
Oh gosh.
I know.
I was going to say start with Carrie.
Okay, start
Right.
with
I was going
Carrie.
to say the same thing.
Carrie's got irons in the fire.
You know, I have had this question often in the last month or so, and I am actually looking forward to just continuing to grow my business and make it stronger and slowly and steadily make it bigger. I'm not in any hurry. This is my only gig. I'm not going anywhere. And I want to, most importantly, enjoy my life and my family. And I've got three girls that are almost all in high school and one going to college in the fall. And I just want to soak up every single second with them and create moments and not miss a moment. So we're growing, but nothing crazy is happening over here. We are just trying to become stronger and enjoy life.
So I've spent 20 years creating a business that was a gathering place, and now I have closed my doors to my dining room. So now I'm really finding myself wanting to spread my horizons in a different way. I want to try to take on, find ways to teach more baking classes, write more cookbooks, and find more ways to fellowship with people in a different way. I am a big connector. I love connecting with people, and that's something I truly miss. So my goal right now is to find new ways to connect with people in a different way.
Yeah, so much of what Carrie said is kind of my philosophy too. You know, I feel like I've said this several times, but this wasn't in the plan for me. You know, this is something that happened, and I'm so grateful for. But that family work balance is so important. I know I could work harder. I know I could make more money. I know I can do this. I know I could do that. But sometimes it's just about pumping the brakes a little and being happy right where you are. And I think that's where you find a little contentment. That's where you find some happiness, is when you find that balance. And for us, for me and my family, we're there. You know, I love spending time in the kitchen, whether it's at home or here in the test kitchen for me. But I also love spending time with my family, and I know, you know, that growing a lot means a lot less time with them. And so for me, it's again about finding that balance. So
Sounds good. We had someone write in, do you have any tips for people who are trying to eliminate gluten or reduce gluten?
There's I will say this: there are a lot of great. If you walk the flour aisle, there are so many ways. I'm kind of built of gluten personally, but I understand
those are
and appreciate that, sometimes folks do have allergies, but also I will say that sometimes you can really come up with great recipes with the different flavors that you'll get from these flours that you find too. And that's kind of my approach. I like to play around with flours and see how they can bring more flavor. But Carrie, I know you have a gluten-free biscuit, so
We do. I'm really bad about things like this because I fought it for a long time. But I mean, we had so many requests, so we it was hard to make a good gluten-free biscuit. And I hear that ours is pretty decent. We love cup for cup flour, and that is in the grocery store. And that, I would say, is the reason that our biscuits taste as good as they do. So definitely, if you're baking with gluten-free in mind, I don't know how you feel about that flour, Cheryl, but we love it.
yeah, that's awesome.
And my other suggestion would be grits, corn. I love alternatives to that's what I go to when I think of not having gluten. Corn, grits.
right. Yeah, it's hard, but like Cheryl said, there's so many products out there that are geared toward people with gluten sensitivity, and I think sometimes just a trip down the grocery aisle will help. Obviously, you can't. In many cases, you can't just make those replacements. There have to be other adjustments made. So, realizing that failure is part of that process too. That sometimes you may have to tweak things to get them right. But yeah, grits are great too.
Make a grit pie even. And one trick that I do have for gluten-free crust, one of my bakers had a sister, or has a sister rather, that is has celiacs. And I thought this was a brilliant idea, and you can make a lot of pies this way. She goes and gets the gluten-free cookies and makes cookie crust out of those, just butter and the gluten-free cookies, and then you can. There's a lot of pies that don't have flour in them. So, that have cornmeal and other things. So that's what I would do.
Very smart.
Let's see. There's a question for Carrie. Will there be a season 2 of How She Rolls?
Yay.
We're trying to work that out right now. The interesting thing that most people don't know about public television is it's all based on donations. So you don't sell like advertising on public television. That's one of the really great things about it, is that's what makes it so authentic. So yes, we really want to do a season 2, but we have to raise the money first. So that's what we're working on right now.
Sounds good. Someone wrote in, how do you maintain your enjoyment of cooking since it has become your business? Anyone can jump in.
Well, I always said the day that I walk in the door and I am happy every time I put the key in the door, even 20 years later. The day that I don't like to do that, I probably will go into a different business. But I really do love feeding people and cooking. I always have. And I think in some ways I always will.
That's why you're also good at it. Someone's writing in for Thanksgiving. Do you have any recommendations for a non-traditional side dish?
I'm very traditional when it comes.
Yeah,
to
me too. I was just thinking the same thing. I didn't really realize that until I was just thinking about it. But yeah, we're pretty traditional around our way too.
We are so traditional. Like, I get real territorial. People say, "Can I bring something?" And I say, "Absolutely not. This is a good meal. You do not touch it." I do make cranberries that have
Thanks, but no thanks.
very thinly sliced jalapenos and orange zest or grapefruit zest, and that's about as crazy as we get.
I do a great, I don't think this is not traditional, but it always has to be on the plate. I do scallop potatoes. I know a lot of people do mashed potatoes, but I do a great scallop potato that has no cheese or anything. It's an old Martha Stewart recipe. It's garlic scallop potatoes, and it just has butter, heavy cream, and garlic. And it's so good.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah, it cooks
it does.
slow, and it's amazing.
We had a guest write in. This must be when we were talking about gluten-free. She writes, "Yellow or white cornmeal? ? I'm originally from Western Kentucky, but moved to New England. It's impossible to find white self-rising cornmeal in the grocery store. I usually bring it back on an airplane from Kentucky. I guess I don't know what you would use that for. Maybe you guys are more familiar with that."
Well, I am a fan of I used to be, I don't know if you can do it anymore, but I used to hoard ingredients. I come from a long line of ingredients hoarders. Did you too, Carrie? When I would travel someplace, I would get condiments, or when I was growing up in Los Angeles, we would bring that cornmeal back, or boiled peanuts and all kinds of stuff. But
Oh yeah, I used to put my mom's country ham biscuits in my suitcase when I lived in New York, and I would just tuck them inside my suitcase, and then I'd keep them in the freezer for way longer than I should, and I'd like heat 4 at a time and wrap them in foil and take them to work. I mean, I just treated them like they were gold. So similar to that.
I think the internet is the answer to that. You can get
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
about anything.
Yeah, white lily is my flour of choice, and I do like their cornmeal mix, and you can get it on Amazon or whitelily.com, and
Mhm.
they ship beautifully.
All right, I think this will be the last question. What are 3 things you want cooks, readers to take away from your books?
3 things.
3 things. You can do 2 or 1 also. We're pretty flexible here.
Just because I feel like I'm a glutton for punishment, I'll start. I think I think getting to the table is the most important thing. And for me, if that means sometimes your recipes include a can of cream of chicken soup or a packet of gravy mix, I'm all for it, because anything that you can do to get your family to the table is the most important thing. Um, and I guess in the same vein, if that's what you like, it's okay. I feel like early on, I wanted to tell people that, there's so many diets out there. There are so many websites out there that tell you that you should eat this or you shouldn't eat that. And for me, it's always been about saying whatever it is that you do, it's okay. And I loved, somebody mentioned this earlier about however your grandmother made it, that's the right way. And it might be different than the way that my grandmother made it, but how your grandmother made it is the right way. So you should do it that way, regardless of what it is.
I love that.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, for me, and it's such an emotional topic. I've sat at the table with my children from the time they could sit upright, and I, prop them up in a high chair, and to tonight. And it is my grounding space. It is the most important and favorite time of the day. And it's not always pretty. It could be a Big Mac and French fries, and I, throw it but sitting around the table and the ritual of that, to me, is sacred. And it doesn't really matter what you're eating. It is creating that time when it's just you or just your family and friends, whoever your family is and friends, whatever. It doesn't matter. But that to me is priceless, and that is the stuff that I know will be passed on in my family, and I know that they will continue to do that. And I think there's so much good stuff in that.
Sounds good.
I think I want folks to really, I don't want anyone to skip the introduction of my cookbook, because I spent a really long time. It's very personal, and I want you to be open to hearing my personal story, and learning my culture. That's something that's really important, in my legacy. And also, I would love for people to be able to get around, like they said. Both of them said, I want folks to get in the kitchen and start baking. I am a strong believer in the power of connection through food. And I just think it's a really powerful thing to learn how to make some delicious chocolate cake or sweet potato loaf cake, make brioche, make 2 loaves, and take one to somebody that, is going to be a new friend, I hope. So I just think there's such a connection that happens through food. Obviously, we wouldn't all be here tonight. And I just think I want people to be open to receive, the information. But please don't skip my introduction.
Someone just wrote in. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Christy Jordan is a dear friend of mine. She wrote the foreword for my book. And I was at one of her book signings one time, and she said something that it's always stuck with me. And she said, when we send our families out into the world every day, they're changed a little. Things happen to them, they have experiences. And when they come back home, they're a little different. They're a little changed by the world that day. And when you gather back at the table, you get to find out who everybody became. And that's the opportunity to learn about your family and also know what's happening in their lives. So I've heard this phrase several times. I think Carrie's the one that said it, that the table is the grounding space. And so when you're able to pull everybody back to that table, you get to see who they became that day.
Mm-hmm. So true, so true. And of course, Stacy, you have recipes on your blog all the time that people can delve into. So you have
That's right.
You have good teaching facility there.
We do. That's the great thing about that medium is when steps get complicated or hard, we can show them video or show them photos and to try to give people a little confidence so they know that they can make those recipes.
Well, I can't thank you guys enough. I think the books are fabulous. They make great presents for the holidays.
Yes.
And you're also different and you're also terrific. So thank you for spending the evening with Darien Library. We can't wait to get into these books and try everything.
Libraries. That's how I learned. That's how I became a baker. I spent a lot of time in libraries sitting on the floor in the cookbook section. So
well, you've been so nice to do this, and we can't wait to get into those books and try some recipes tomorrow.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, guys. See you soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.